Namo tassa bhagavato arahato sammasambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato sammasambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato sammasambuddhassa. Buddham dhammang sanghang namasami. Dear friends, welcome to this Sunday afternoon sutta study class at the Dhammadharini Monastery. This afternoon we're going to be looking at the Saḻāyatanavibhaṅgasutta, the analysis of the six sense fields, which is number 137 in the middle length discourses. For those who are here in the room, do you just want to listen or do you want to have books to look at? Okay. So we'll have some books coming out here. Middle length discourses. I want to review briefly how we came to the sutta, because it's following onto a sequence of discussions that we've had over the past several weeks. We've been considering the practice of peace, or practicing for peace in a world on fire. We've been considering the ethical aspect of it, the aspect of right speech and conflict resolution. And then we've been considering the practice of tranquil meditation, especially in the jhana, and how that contributes to enabling the psychology to be transformed and the heart to become more peaceful. And then finally, we came to the wisdom aspect of it, and we're asking this question: how can wisdom make us peaceful? How can wisdom lead to social harmony? And that brought us to the consideration of kama tanha, or sensual desire, which is a powerful root of all kinds of conflict, especially considering kama tanha, not just in terms of pleasure connected with the physical senses, but also pleasure in terms of materialistic wealth. And so having your house and your barn and your pantry filled with food, having your cattle and animals, and so on, all those signs of wealth, which should be a source of security and happiness. And then also in terms of social wealth, in terms of having a social position. This is, there's a Pali word called bandha, which is about those relatives who have the responsibility of protecting. So if you have dependents for whom you are the protector, in other words, if you have employees and slaves and children and spouse, and it's your job to protect them, so you also have, you might think that you can control them and tell them what to do, and that will be a source of security and happiness for you. And likewise, if you have people, relatives that you look up to who are protecting you, your older parents or your older brother or your spouse or the leader of the clan that you belong to, that you expect that they will protect you. And if something happens that's a hazard to your safety, you can call the police, you can call your relatives, and they will come and make a war on your behalf. And so that's supposed to make you happy. So we were thinking about these kinds of um, social, these kinds of forms of happiness of a materialistic type, which are very poor, fleeting, and kind of inadequate. Um, when we give up them, these, and when we relinquish our attachment to these kinds of happiness, materialistic happiness, we can find a new freedom and open the way for the middle way, for the pure, undefiled happiness of, especially of meditation. And this is in the range of what's called nekkhamma, or relinquishment. And how to relinquish those unwholesome, inadequate, sensual pleasures in order to open the way for the more safe and harmless spiritual happiness. And that will be the exact answer, which is given in the sutta that we're going to speak about today, the analysis of the six sense fields. So here we go. I'm going to share the screen so that we can look at the sutta together. Ayatana is the different kinds of faculties. The Saḻāyatana is the six kinds of faculties, or the six sense fields. So I heard at one time the Buddha was staying in Savatthi in Jeta's Grove, Anathapindika's monastery. There the Buddha addressed the mendicants. Mendicants, Venerable Sir, they replied. The Buddha said, I shall teach you the analysis of the six sense fields. Listen, apply your minds well. I will speak. Yes, sir, they replied. The Buddha said, the six interior sense fields should be understood. The six exterior sense fields should be understood. The six classes of consciousness should be understood. The six classes of contact should be understood. The 18 mental preoccupations should be understood. The 36 positions of sentient beings should be understood. Therein, relying on this, give up that. The Noble One cultivates the establishment of mindfulness in three cases, by virtue of which they are a teacher, worthy to instruct a group. Of all meditation tutors, it is he that is called the supreme guide for those who wish to train. So this brief summary is the outline of the talk that the Buddha is going to give. If you were in oral tradition without the benefit of computers or printed written words, you would be mentally making up a matrix that's going to be 666 1836, and planning to fill in that outline with the information that the Buddha is about to share. The 6 interior sense fields should be understood. That's what I said. Why did I say it? That is the eye, ear, nose, tongue, body, and mind. The 6 interior sense fields should be understood. So these are the inner faculties that have the capacity of receiving the contact of a particular type that's matching that faculty. So for most people, visual objects are cognized or are received by way of the eye faculty, and auditory or sounds are cognized by way of the ear, and so on. In some rare individuals, those faculties can be mixed up, and sounds can be experienced visually, and sights can be experienced as sounds, and so forth like that. But in general, there are these gateways, and then the mind has 2 aspects. One is that the mind is able to process the inputs that are coming in through the 5 physical gates and put them together. I gave the example before of about my former husband when I was a young woman. So the mind is able to put together the sound, the smell, the taste, and the form of that person, and assemble it into a single perception. So that's one thing the mind does. But the mind is also able to cognize ideas or concepts which don't have a counterpart necessarily in a physical input coming in. That could be something which is a memory, or it could be something that's an abstraction. So, like, you could say something like the square root of 4, or the quality of the number 7 being a prime number, would be an example of a mental concept that can be cognized. So that's the sense that should be understood. Just as like it's about how the human being is able to have any kind of experience at all or to know anything at all. It's only through these gates. The 6 exterior fields should be understood. They are the corresponding external types of things: sights, sounds, smells, tastes, touches, and ideas. And then the 6 classes of consciousness, that is the capacity to, either the capacity or the process of cognizing. I know that Richard is here today, and he's frequently suggested that cognition or cognizing is less confusing, because then you would definitely relate this as a process or an event that's happening in a momentary way, and not that the consciousness is a permanent thing which has a self of its own. Um, it's the kind of part of the gist of this whole teaching, is to defeat the false, confused impression that a person could get that the consciousness is a permanent thing, but instead to train the mind to observe and to notice the consciousness arising together with the internal and the external faculty and the contact. So one of the deep purposes of this line of the teaching is to experience cognition as something that's arising in countless moments. So the 6 classes of contact should be understood. So the contact, that's the triple conjunction. So the ear, I should say the eye, the invisible object, and the eye consciousness. Those 3 things come together. And then there's what's called the eye contact. That's the meeting of the 3. Those should be understood. This is giving a little bit more detail about the a sequence that's also given independent origination about the arising of dukkha. So now we come to what's called the 18 mental preoccupations. So seeing a sight with the eye, one is preoccupied with a sight that's a basis for happiness, for sadness, or equanimity. So you have 3 possible preoccupations that can be arising through sight. And likewise, sound, nose, tongue, body, and mind. Any one of those can become a preoccupation. So there's 6 preoccupations with happiness, 6 preoccupations with sadness, 6 preoccupations with equanimity. That's the 18 preoccupations. I'm going to pause here for a minute and see if we have a question or if we can clarify what the significance is about these preoccupations. If a person has been experiencing some strong traumatic experience, they could fall into a preoccupation where they would tend to be ruminating about the same boring idea over and over again. And whatever they hear a certain sound or see a certain sight, it reminds them about their problem. And then it's triggered off into this rumination about this reaction about whatever the strong, heavy, or traumatic experience one has had. Conversely, if one is overwhelmed with desire, one could become preoccupied with the object of one's desire. And so, like, it could be, like I don't want to give a real example. So if you suppose that I'm obsessed with the roses that we have in the yard, and I just love them so much, I adore them. I'm constantly thinking about taking care of the roses. We have such a good rose. Let's keep the roses going. And so then anytime I'm coming out into the yard, and I would smell the roses, and the thought or the worry or the constant attention thinking about the roses would take over the mind, and I would be preoccupied in that way. That's a fictional example, but one could think of real examples. I would like to invite whether any from the monastery, or whether Ayya Brahmavara has anything to add about what's the skillful way to think about these mental preoccupations.
Thank you, Aya. Yeah, I just love this, elucidation of our experience. Like, this is how it is. This is what we're experiencing, from the external to the internal. And these are the ways in which we experience it. And so, as you pointed to, Aya, it's all really an encouragement to let go of the sense of personal, me and mine and so forth, identification with. And these preoccupations are where it gets to the tricky, sticky aspect. So the contact, the impressions, the consciousness that arises, all very fine. It's all very straightforward. And then we get pleasant, unpleasant, or neutral. Like we were talking about sensations this morning and meditating on feeling, and pleasant, unpleasant, or neutral. And then we have the relationship to that. And then the, trouble starts, wanting more of the pleasant, less of the unpleasant, dulling out with the neutral. And so it's really beautiful to me that there it's all laid out. It's just like you can investigate this. And when you apply your mind to investigate these things, then you can start letting go of the attachment to self and the suffering around them. How beautiful.
Yeah, thank you. And we are hoping to let go of these preoccupations. But if we're not yet able to let them go, then we should investigate them and keep investigating. And then when we finally understand, then it will be possible to let go. I wonder if there are any question or comment from those monastics at the Aranya Bodhi Hermitage, if you have enough bandwidth. They might not have enough bandwidth. Any other comments or questions about this part? Okay, Anita and Saket.
Good afternoon, Aya. Saket is traveling to India, so it's just me today.
Yes.
I had a question. Like, I was thinking, yes, when the external comes in contact with the internal, we have these pleasant or unpleasant or neutral feelings. But then these are different for different people. So where does that come into picture in this? Like, I think it's the perception aggregator. I was just trying to understand that piece. Why is somebody's pleasant not pleasant for me, or somebody feels pain for something, but I'm okay with that? So if you can elaborate.
Right. This is part of the changeability of feelings. Not only different people, but even yourself on different times. If you say if you're driving and somebody cuts you off in the traffic, perhaps on one day you would feel irritated by it, and another day you would feel just laughing, and on another day you would feel a lot of like a compassion. Say, oh, that person must be in a hurry. I hope they can make it to whatever they're going to. And so the feeling that arises is extremely changeable, even within one person, and then for other people, the kind of feeling that arises is resulting from the underlying tendencies that have been conditioned by the previous choices that we've made. So certain kind of choices and decisions will feed into having an underlying tendency for aversion, or an underlying tendency for greed, or an underlying tendency for delusion and confusion. And whatever is the strongest tendency in you, you'll have a tendency to see everything, respond to many different things in that way.
Yeah. Makes sense. Thank you, Aya.
Okay, so we can go back and read on a little further.
Hi, it's Richard. I wanted to make a comment.
Oh, yes, Richard, please go ahead.
I didn't click on the raising hand.
Yeah, I didn't see the hand raised.
So the beginning of this, I'm looking at Bhikkhu Bodhi's translation, the 18 kinds. He says the 18 kinds of mental exploration. But
Mhm.
if you look at the Pali, the word is manopavichara. So mano is from mana, conceit. So pa means, a lot of times people are dividing this up and saying it's mano upavichara, but it's mano pavichara. Pa means to go forward to, and vichara is kind of like this getting caught up mentally, like mental exploration, you might say, of the thing. So because of this invested conceit, this is mine, this I am, this is myself, it causes us to want to explore and deal with things that bring us happiness, try to get away from things that bring us unhappiness, and maybe rest or get bored with, and therefore want to move on from things that are more neutral. So anyway, I just kind of wanted to make that point. It's just my view about the Pali word there, that I don't think it's upavichara. I think it's really just pa vichara, based on
Okay.
mana.
Thank you.
Anyway, thank you for
We
listening.
can have a long exploration just around that one word on a different, maybe as our homework. We can go home and study, because I see that there's more than one way of understanding that word, upavichara or pavichara. So continuing to this, now we're coming to the 36. The 36 positions of sentient beings should be understood. That's what I say. Why did I say it? There are 6 kinds of domestic happiness, 6 kinds of renunciate happiness, 6 kinds of domestic sadness, 6 kinds of renunciate sadness, 6 kinds of domestic equanimity, 6 kinds of renunciate equanimity. So the word that's I think Bhikkhu Bodhi translated as householder, and Bhante Sujata translated as domestic. That's a geha, which the root meaning of it is like a garden or an enclosure, or in English a garage, or all coming from that same root. And nekkhamma we've been discussing about is probably the it's a little bit mysterious exactly how the root comes to that meaning, but it's nikkhamma, kama, so without desire, or without sensual desire. Because nekkhamma is also associated with the monastic lifestyle of one who's undertaken particularly a celibate form of a monastic form. And then the domestic is the householder. Then people have a superficial way of reading this is like the lay. One way of practicing, or one way of working with this is what lay people do, and one way of working with it is what monastics do. However, I've come to really appreciate the idea that this nikkhamma is, if you take the meaning of detached from sensual craving. separated from sensual craving. It's a much more kind of like a general meaning. And we know that there are many householders who are renunciates within the household lifestyle, although it's not as easy in the householder's form to really live as a renunciate, because there's a lot of social pressures. And there's also a lot of temptation, or a lot of sort of a normal pattern of accumulating accumulating things that you've got your enclosure, your garage or your garden, and you're getting all your stuff, and filling your house with a lot of stuff, filling your life with a lot of stuff, filling yourself with a lot of stuff, a lot of appendages. So then uh, uh, so the domestic is more like a way that's like generalizing it, not just about lay people, but it's about ownership and acquisition. So in this context, what are the 6 kinds of domestic happiness? The sights known by the eye, which are likable, desirable, agreeable, pleasing, connected with worldly pleasures of the flesh. Happiness arises when you regard it as a gain to obtain such sights, or when you recollect the sights you formerly obtained that have passed, ceased, and perished. So, remembering the adventure that you had last summer, and daydreaming about that is also a part of this happiness, this domestic happiness. I want to emphasize that the Buddha is not condemning, saying that it's wrong to have experiences that are likable, desirable, and agreeable. Elsewhere, he points out that for everything that's like that, when craving arises, it arises right there, and it settles down right there. It attaches right there. It settles down right there. So with those likable things is where dukkha begins. But then under the cessation of dukkha, he says that very same likable, desirable, and agreeable moment of contact with the eye, if craving does not arise right there, that's where dukkha ceases. So the cessation of dukkha is happening also within these likable moments. But if we regard it as a gain to obtain, that means to get, to accumulate. Oh, that's the householder's happiness. Likewise, sounds, smells, tastes, touches, and ideas. Now, in this context, what are the 6 kinds of renunciate happiness? When you've understood the impermanence of sights, their perishing, fading away, and cessation, happiness arises as you truly understand, through right understanding, that both formerly and now, all those sights are impermanent, suffering, and perishable. Such happiness is called renunciate happiness. So that's the flash of insight into what's called the tilakkhana, or the 3 characteristics of all the phenomena in the world. all the dependent phenomena. And that very same likable moment, it's an irony, isn't it? When you see the dukkha in that moment, you feel so happy. But it's true, because then we've let go of the grasping. And so in relation to that moment, we've got that freedom. And likewise, when they've understood the impermanence of sound, smells, and so forth. So the perishing, fading away, and cessation. When it's happiness arises when you truly understand through right understanding that all those ideas are impermanent, suffering, and perishable. Now there are 6 kinds of domestic sadness. Same thing, the sights known by the eye, likable, desirable, agreeable. If you regard it as a loss to lose such sights, or when you recollect the sights that you formerly lost, that have passed, ceased, and perished, and you regard it as a loss, that's called domestic sadness or lay sadness. So you can have a happy memory of your vacation last year, or you can have a sorrow and grief because you're not on vacation anymore. All right? So if you thought it was permanent, if you thought you could keep it and then you lost it, then that's the lay sadness. When it comes to the ideas known by the mind, it could include ideas about the self, or that if you thought there was a self, or you thought something was a part of yourself, and you lost it. So I thought my youthful beauty was a part of myself, and now it's gone. So then because of that idea, comes the disappointment, comes the sorrow. Now, the 6 kinds of renunciate sadness. You've understood the impermanence of sights, their perishing, fade away, cessation. You truly understand, both formerly and now, all those sights are impermanent, suffering, perishable. Upon seeing this, you give rise to a yearning for supreme liberations. And so this will be a person who is on the noble quest, who has had a glimpse of some kind of a glimpse of Nibbana, what Nibbana is, or some kind of a partial experience of the path and fruit, but they've not come the entire way. They still have got some tendency towards grasping, and to whatever extent they're grasping after, longing for the subsequent liberations of the mind, the subsequent evolution of their spiritual journey, for complete freedom, complete peace. If they're longing for that, that's called renunciate sadness. Oh, when will I enter and remain in that same dimension as the noble ones enter and remain in today? You give rise to this yearning for supreme liberation like this, and sadness arises because of the yearning. Such sadness is called renunciate sadness. And likewise for sound, smells, tastes, touches, and ideas. Any questions so far about this part? The domestic happiness and renunciate happiness, domestic sorrow and renunciate sorrow. IA, do you have anything to add about these two?
Thank you, Aya. Yeah, it's really nice to contemplate these, isn't it? And I suspect that we can all relate to letting go of the domestic happiness and sadness, that everyone's in this way of practicing, you know, like I'm not going to get all caught up with material things. I'm not thinking that, you know, I'm going to have great happiness from eating a nice meal that will last for any length of time. It's just not that sustainable, that kind of happiness. And so that turning towards the spiritual path and the adjustment of our values that happens, and then this renunciant happiness and sadness, I'm sure we can all relate to. I mean, it's just that kind of, oh, how many more layers of dukkha are there to be witnessed here? You know, how much more craving do I have to, you know, sit with before I can feel the freedom from desire and this kind of experience? So for me, it's really just wonderful to consider, you know, how does it relate to myself and my own experiences? And this sort of way of just categorizing everything I find so helpful. We can just, in a way, you could say label the experience, but in labeling the experience, we've got a handle on it, and we're stepping back, and it's less personal, and it becomes Dhamma for us. So how wonderful.
Yes, exactly. Being able to recognize something for what it is, it can be very calming. And then you can sort of say, okay, it is what it is, and then be calm about it. Okay, Anita?
I was thinking about when a family, not about like the material things, but like when a family member or someone who's close by passes away, then there is dukkha that I will not be able to see them, hear them, listen to them, talk to them.
Mhm.
I was thinking, where does that categorize? And I was thinking whether, be it a domestic layperson or a renunciant, would the feelings be similar, or would the intensity change because there's more wisdom uh, when it comes to renunciation?
So when the Buddha had his parinibbana and left this mortal life, those disciples who were fully enlightened arahants remained in calm meditation. But Venerable Ananda, who at that point was not yet fully enlightened, was leaning on a post, weeping in distress. So when we've actually completed the journey, we know what loss is. We're not in delusion about it, but it is not a cause of this kind of domestic sadness. Instead, it would simply be contemplated as impermanent and perhaps the basis for equanimity. When an ordinary person who still has got a lot of attachments to their family and loved ones experiences a loss, then because of all the previous causes and conditions, you may not be able to skip over that domestic sadness and grief with that loss. It may be that you would have to bear the pain, sorrow, and lamentation because of, to whatever extent there's still some attachment left in that relationship. It may be for a healthy person that after a period of grieving, that sharp piercing pain related to attachment would fade away. And instead, when we remember our loved ones who have gone and passed away before us, we remember them with a smile and with happiness, remembering the things that were so lovable and wonderful about our relatives who passed away before. And we can have that domestic happiness and remembering what was so pleasant and lovable. And then with wisdom, when we really see all of the major transitions that we have in this lifetime as right at the heart of the Buddha's teachings about impermanence and letting go. To the extent that we've realized that, then we won't have to experience those sharp, piercing, painful feelings anymore. That's my understanding. I hope that's helpful for you.
Thank you.
Okay, Richard.
Thank you, Aya. This section here where he starts this grief of the renunciate, when will I also, attain these, complete liberation and everything. It's very interesting. If you look at Sutta 44, the Chula Vedala Sutta, with Vishaka and
Yes. Lady Dhammadina.
Dhammadina. Section 28, it says, lady, does the underlying tendency to lust have to be abandoned in regard to all pleasant feeling? Does the underlying tendency to aversion have to be abandoned in regard to all painful feeling? Does the underlying tendency to ignorance have to be abandoned in regard to all neither painful nor pleasant feeling? And Vishaka says, no, I'm not going to read that whole section. And then she says, here, friend Visakha, quite secluded from sensual pleasure, one enters into the first jhana, and that pleasure is okay to be desired. I'm just paraphrasing. And then the next section, when that thought begins to rise in the mind, oh, when will I also, attain, those things that the Arahants, the Buddha and everything have attained? That's that grief. She says, no, that's good grief. That's okay. You want to generate that grief. And then the final part is when you enter into the fourth jhana, and you have purity of mindfulness due to equanimity, that abandons the underlying tendency to ignorance. So it's not completely eradicated at that point, but so those three problems, lust, aversion, and ignorance, are kind of combated using these three techniques, actually. So anyways, I just wanted to make that point. Thank you very much.
Thank you. I think in the later part of this sutta is going through that exact same ground in a slightly different format. So the Majjhima 44, the Chula Vedala Sutta, and this sutta are both covering very similar ground relating to what is the significance of the feeling aspect of the jhana meditation. And we also have touched on that last week in terms of the idea that the happiness of meditation is the kind of the middle way between greed for sensual pleasure and self-mortification. So those are the two extremes. And then in the middle is the happiness, you could say the happiness of the soul path of practice, or the happiness of meditation. So let's come back to the sutta now. And I hope others will not hesitate to put your hand up if there are questions. Now we've come to the equanimity. The domestic equanimity, seeing a sight with the eye, Equanimity arises for the unlearned, ordinary person, a foolish, ordinary person who has not overcome their limitation and the result of deeds, and is blind to the drawbacks. So they don't see the danger in equanimous feeling or the objects, which are neutral objects. Such equanimity does not transcend the sight. My understanding of that, the Venerable Bhikkhuni Dhammadina said that for an ordinary person having a neutral feeling, there's the underlying tendency to ignorance. So one is just a person to be oblivious and to not notice what's happening. And sometimes people are blessed with even having like the physical or the genetic or their social background or something, that they don't react very much to things. They just have got a lot of stoic ability to be facing all different kind of challenges, and they can just face it and deal with it, and they don't get excited about it. And if they think that that's all there is, that they've solved a problem because they're not getting upset or not getting excited, then they've missed the point. So in order to reach the goal, the Buddha is setting a higher standard, that it's so important to be actually continuing to question, even when the strong positive and negative feelings have faded away, and what we're usually experiencing is more in the neutral range. Not to become contented with that, but continue to investigate and question. And if we are depending on the stability of that, living in a neutral space, or having some identification with living in that neutral space, thinking this is our safety, we've missed the boat. We haven't thought to look closely and to notice the impermanence, unreliability, and so forth, and seeing the danger and seeing the necessity to go beyond, even with something which is the kind of object that's evoking a neutral feeling, or else the kind of psychology that's just reacting to all kind of situations in a neutral way. That's not the solution. It needs to be continuously questioned. So likewise with each one of the sense gates. The foolish ordinary person has not overcome their limitation. And the results of deeds. So this part about karma is bringing us to the danger related to the cycle of rebirth. If we are continuously doing deeds and not having the insight into impermanence, and assuming or doing the kind of deeds that lead us to be reborn in another realm, then we face the dukkha of the round of rebirth. Even if we're not neither going to a heavenly realm nor to a hell realm, but nevertheless we're still in danger because of the dukkha of the round. Now the 6 kinds of renunciate equanimity. This is recommended when you've understood the impermanence of sights, their perishing, fading away, and cessation. Equanimity rises in you as you truly understand through right understanding how, both formerly and now, all the sights are impermanent, suffering, and perishable. This is seeing the three marks. So with continuously contemplating about the three marks again and again, continuously doing that contemplation, contemplating that Dhamma, then eventually the heart or mind, the citta, can be conditioned towards a form of equanimity which transcends the sight. So you're no longer limited to or attached to the visual sight experience or the objects that you connect with that. This is called renunciate equanimity. I'm going to rush ahead into the part which is about the how-to. This is the very interesting, unique, and useful about how to practice. Relying on this, give up that. Therein, relying on this, give up that. That's what I said, and why did I say it? By relying on the 6 kinds of renunciate happiness, give up and go beyond the 6 kinds of domestic happiness. Who can explain this? So what they are? The domestic happiness and the renunciate happiness? Somebody in the room want to explain it?
Didn't we just go through it in the sutta? Did we just go through it?
Yeah. So he's saying relying on, but this is the step, relying on renunciate happiness, give up domestic happiness. So if you're getting the kind of pleasure from the delightful experiences that leads to acquisition, gain, craving, clinging, preoccupation, then you should look for renunciate happiness. I think this will also be coming into the contemplation of the 3 marks and letting go of clinging. So that's viviceva kamehi, letting go of sensual craving because of that contemplating of the 3 marks. And with that coming to that seclusion from sensual craving, this is the entering into the jhana, entering into the first jhana. So the pleasant, pure, safe, pleasant feeling connected with jhana, I think is a cure for being attached to material happiness.
It set me thinking about the gradual training, which also has like the morality and the sense restraint and the contentment leading up to also actually the jhanas. So I wonder if you see any like connections or how to like see these two explanations, sort of how they mesh together.
That's a really great question. And Anagari Kamidakante had earlier given a sutta that was pointing out that connection which extends over the entire path of training. So we know that undertaking our right view and right thought, we are doing a big renunciation of wrong views or clinging onto opinions, letting go of greed and aversion, and then with the steps related to ethics, we will have, in effect, we've learned the true significance of the practice of loving kindness and compassion and generosity. So we've got with that nikkama at the beginning of the path of being generous, not being so selfish. You know how happy you feel when you do something generous? You know, it's like when you think about doing something generous and then you plan to do it and you go through all the steps of organizing to do some generous deed, and then you do the deed, and then afterwards you remember the good generous thing that you've done, and all of those different steps of generosity, that's another part of renunciation, are all a source of a very pure, safe kind of happiness. And it also is weakening the danger of self-conceit, because you're not being selfish. And so by removing stinginess is also setting a condition to gradually wear down that self-conceit. And then likewise with the gradual purification of morality and the practice of loving kindness on the Brahma Viharas, in effect, one is practicing sort of like a heavenly lifestyle, living and practicing in a way which is in which we would be, as long as we kept up those practices, we would be very safe from ever falling into a woeful state. If we're doing loving kindness, if we're doing generosity, if we're keeping our sila, and then if we should die while the mind is like that, we would be reborn in heaven. We're not aiming for hell. And then even the life that we live today is a heavenly life and not a hellish life. And so that is a kind of a happiness. But that connection of renunciation with generosity is something that was very good to bring up. So you could say that, yeah. So that's the first step. Rely on this, doing that. Relying on this, give up that. Now here's the other one. The second one. Relying on the 6 kinds of renunciate sadness. Give up the 6 kinds of domestic sadness. So the domestic sadness is the grief over the loss of the things that we had before. And a renunciate sadness is having transcended the idea of personal possession and letting go of that, and instead turning our awareness and our motivation and our drive towards the attainment of the path and fruit of this noble practice. So to whatever extent there's some of this renunciate sadness left, that's what's also feeding the drive for us to continue practicing on this noble path towards the path and fruit of the noble path. And then relying on the 6 kinds of renunciate equanimity, give up the 6 kinds of domestic equanimity. Okay, so the domestic equanimity is don't know, don't care, didn't notice, unaware, oblivious. You're not suffering because you're in a daze or in a doze or just got the blinders on. And instead, the renunciate equanimity is to fully take the blinders off, to be fully aware, to be fully awake to the insight to continuously see everything passing away. My colleague Aya Savijana gave one of the most beautiful examples of that attitude in terms of what spring to mind. Early on, when we were just getting started with the Aranya Bodhi Hermitage, somebody who knew something about business management wanted us to have a planning meeting in which we would visualize the future of the Hermitage. And so they had our group in the circle to, visualize what the Hermitage might become. And I, Suvajana said, I visualize that it will all be destroyed and finished. And it was just, like what immediately came to mind for her because of the kind of practice and the kind of thinking that she was doing, and how beautiful, how light, and how healthy it is to live in that way instead of carrying like this gigantic tortoise shell of the goals and objectives and all the things in the planner. Don't need to be carried around like that as far as the materialistic goals because of that insight. So this is saying if you have the tendency towards dullness, do this contemplation. Actually, and I'll say one other thing that about this. This is personal. I noticed that when I was much younger, just getting started with Buddhism, I had a lot of different kinds of restlessness and also a lot of drive to for that investigation of Dhamma. And then in the recent years, because of aging, something changed within me, and a huge measure of the restlessness is really gone now. So I'm no longer restless in the way that I used to be when I was younger. But I have the danger of dullness, which I see as being just part of the aging sign and the changes of the brain or something like that. Even like the faculties getting weaker, like my ears are not so strong and my eyes are not so strong, so I can't see very much and I can't hear very much and I can't feel very much. I can't taste very much. I can't smell very much. And so there's this like this potential for dullness. And when I had at one time I did have a chance to ask for some counseling from a teacher about this, and the teacher said, this is really important. You've got to practice that contemplation of the three marks of existence. You've got to really do this to activate your brain and keep the brain activated for this. Otherwise, you could lose your way. So that's quite interesting. So this is a really super practical advice. So this is we've done 3 times 6, so we've done 18. Now we've got 18 more to go. I want to stop here and see if anybody either has a question or could give an example about how they were able to rely on this and give up that. I might just call on somebody at random if you don't put your hand up. Yeah, can you think of an example? Okay, Karina. I was looking at you, Karina. Yes.
Darn, I don't have an example, but I have a comment.
Yes.
I was really I saw something in a new way. I guess earlier in the sutta, I was trying to figure out, normally I hear the grouping of pleasant, unpleasant, and neutral. And this was more, the preoccupations were like happiness, sadness, and equanimity. And I was trying to like, well, is equanimity just like neutrality? Which I knew it wasn't, but I was trying to understand. And the way you described it clarified it for me. And I think I was also drawn to it because my last name is Stoicescu, like Stoic-escu, which basically means a Romanian Stoic. So I've always been interested in that concept. And I thought you described it really well, that it's not good enough to just be even about it. It really depends why you're even about it, to deeply understand the characteristics. And I don't have a good example, but an example I have is it's a little personal, but it has to do with my dad. My dad's really not good at understanding the way he speaks and how it affects people. And he can say some really inappropriate things. Like when someone's afraid and he says like just the thing that, like my grandma was afraid of dying and he's like, oh, I heard someone else that died from that same thing. And it's like, no, that's not what you tell grandma who's afraid right now. And he unfortunately doesn't understand, like even if you point it out, he just doesn't understand why that's a problem, and he hasn't improved. I haven't seen any improvement in his lifetime, and it's quite terrible because I see people like, going away from him because he doesn't have this ability to see the drawback, not exactly in the three marks, but a different kind. Just how important it is to not just be, he's quite happy. Like he's not affected by many things. He can do things that I would not even dream of doing. He can he has walked up to a clerk and just been like, can you just give me this for free? And the cashier person's like, no, you have to pay for it. But he just, things like that. He doesn't have sort of that kind of understanding, and how important it is to be able to learn and grow from it. Thank you.
Thank you. I'm going to go back into the sutta and see if we can wrap up this final section, which is so more. It's a little bit more abstract unless you are able to practice jhana meditation or beyond. But this next section is quite significant to listen to. So I'm going to again share the document. Share. Now, there is equanimity that is diversified based on diversity, and equanimity that is unified based on unity. What is that equanimity based on diversity? There is equanimity towards sight, sound, smell, taste, and touches. This is equanimity based on diversity. What is equanimity based on unity? There's equanimity based on the dimension of infinite space, infinite consciousness, nothingness, and neither perception nor non-perception. This is equanimity based on unity. That is to say, the immaterial meditations. Therein, relying on equanimity based on unity, give up equanimity based on diversity. So within meditation, at each stage of meditation, no matter how blissful, wonderful, and fantastic it is, if we're aiming for awakening, the mindfulness may kick in either within the meditation experience or emerging from the meditation experience, wherein one recognizes that this meditation and all of its characteristics are conditioned. Therefore, they are impermanent, dukkha, and not self. And therein one lets go of any attachment to those experiences or any aspect of those experiences. So then this seems to be pointing to the equanimity of the fourth jhana, which is kind of like the culmination of the four jhana experience. And then giving up the equanimity based on jhana would be the a description of what's happening when we leave the fine material jhanas behind and go to the immaterial meditations. I'm going to keep on reading this final section. Relying on not being determined by that, give up equanimity based on unity. So this is even within the immaterial meditation. It comes to being rather abstract, but this not being determined by that, that's not having a self or creating any kind of a thing or any kind of reifying any kind of permanent thing out of that experience. So then relying on not being determined by that, then we give up the equanimity based on unity. That's how it's given up. Therein relying on that, on this, give up that. He says, noble ones cultivate the establishment of mindfulness in 3 cases, by virtue of which they are a teacher worthy to instruct a group. That's what I said. Why did I say it? The first case is when the teacher teaches the Dhamma to his disciples out of kindness and sympathy. This is for your welfare. This is for your happiness. But their disciples don't want to listen. They don't actively listen or try to understand. They proceed having turned away from the teacher's instruction. In this case, the realized one is not unhappy. He does not feel unhappiness. He remains unfestering, mindful, and aware. That's the first case. And in the second case, he gives the teaching in just the same way. Some of the disciples don't want to listen, don't actively listen or try to understand. They proceed turning away. But some of the disciples do want to listen. They actively listen and try to understand. They don't proceed having turned away. In that case, the realized one is not unhappy, nor is he happy. Rejecting both happiness and unhappiness, he remains equanimous, mindful, and aware. That's the second case. And then in the third case, he teaches the Dhamma in exactly the same way. And the disciples want to listen. They actively listen. They try to understand. They don't proceed having turned away from the teacher's instruction. And in this case, the realized one is happy. He does feel happiness, but he remains unfestering, mindful, and aware. This is the third case in which the noble one cultivates establishing mindfulness. In this way, they're a teacher worthy to instruct the group. Of all meditation tutors, it is he that's called the supreme guide for those who wish to train. Driven by an elephant trainer, an elephant in training proceeds in just one direction, east, west, north, or south. Same for a horse, same for an ox. But driven by the realized one, the perfected one, the fully awakened Buddha, a person in training proceeds in 8 directions, Having a physical form, they see forms. First direction. Not perceiving physical form internally, they see them externally. Second direction. They're focused on beauty. This is one of the liberation. It's the liberation of the mind through the contemplation of beauty. It's associated with metta. That's the third direction. Going totally beyond perception of form, with the ending of perception of impingement, not focusing on perception of diversity. Aware that space is infinite, they remain in the dimension of infinite space. That's the fourth direction. And now this is going through the 4 immaterial meditations. Aware that consciousness is infinite, in the dimension of infinite consciousness is the 5th. Going beyond infinite consciousness, aware there's nothing at all, they remain in the dimension of nothingness. That's the 6th. In the perception of neither, in the dimension of neither perception nor non-perception. That's the 7th. And entering and remaining in the cessation of perception and feeling is the 8th. So these are all of the higher meditation states. In today's class, I'm not really prepared to discuss or try to explain the meaning or the significance of these higher meditation states, because I felt that the part of this sutta, which is the most important and significant for us, is the part about recognizing the 6 kinds of feelings connected with householder life, and the parallel 6 kinds of feelings associated with renunciation, and how just as Brahmavara was pointing out, it's almost like an Abhidhamma approach. If you know in a really clear way, this is where I'm at. This is very clearly, I know what I'm experiencing right there. Just there is extremely beneficial in terms of being able to go beyond distress or agitation about where we are. And also, if you have like a map of the path and you're able to place yourself on the map, if you're trying to orient yourself, you wouldn't know which direction to go unless you know where you are. So part of orienteering, like if you're in the wilderness, if you have a compass, it doesn't do you any good at all to have a compass if you don't know where you are. So you got to know both where you're at and which direction you're trying to go in. And this is a very useful and beneficial kind of a schema or a map in which you may be able to clearly know and perceive the kind of feelings that arise for you. And then based on that, you may choose what you'd like to do next. I know that we've gone over our time, but I'm willing to stay for a few minutes longer if others would like to give their comments, questions, or closing report on how you might visualize using this teaching in your own practice. Okay, Richard.
Thank you. I just want to make a couple of comments. The Buddha, who reacts in the 3 ways, depending on the students, it's like, all right, nobody's understanding. So he doesn't get upset or anything. What's the matter with you dummies? Why can't you get this or something? That's what they're talking about. It's not satisfying to him, but he remains unmoved. Or if some are getting it, some aren't, he's not like saying, what's the matter with you guys? Can't you see these guys over here? They're getting it, come on now. And same thing. And if everyone gets it, he doesn't say, see what a good teacher I am. You guys have really got it because I'm such a great teacher. In other words, he remains unmoved no matter what happens, even if he's inwardly pleased. So that's the first thing. The next thing is these 8 directions. It's called here as 8 directions. This is just my view, okay? So the first one is that having a form, he sees forms internally. So the forms internally are the 31 bodily parts. That this form is not just a form. It's made up of all these different forms. And then not just thinking of his own body internally, he looks outside and he sees all forms are the same way. They're also just made up of all these different things. There's no thing that's really just a complete, whole within itself type substance or anything like that. And then the next one is he focuses on the beautiful. Well, it's described in sutras that this focusing on the beautiful is the 4 Brahma Viharas, or the 4 jhanas, the jhanic states. Those are beautiful states of consciousness. And then, of course, the rest are the 8 levels of the formlessness. So like that. Anyway, that's just my view of the first 3. I think the last 5 are kind of, easy to see. But I think the first 3 might be a little difficult to understand. But again, that's just my view. Others might have a different view. Anyways, thank you very much for listening.
Thank you. I may then give Aya Brahmavara the chance for the last word.
Thank you, Aya. Yeah, I'm just really struck by how, like in so many suttas, in this sutta, it's like wherever we are in the process, whatever experiences we're having, they are included within this sutta. Like this sutta has covered all the possibilities. I just love that. So there's all the possibilities for what we may be experiencing right now, and we can categorize and we can see, okay, and how to surmount that. Okay, this is the way. If I'm experiencing desire for some worldly thing, I can just remember, let's move it into a renunciate desire for liberation, and so on. And then these 8 directions, again, for me, also, wherever we are, we're going to be in one of those 8 categories, and we may move from one to another. But we can see that everybody on the spiritual path is fitting into one of those 8, and we can figure where we are in that and see how things progress. So I just find it such a beautiful and complete map, as you said, Aya, of the path. And as you said, let's see how we can use the sutta to find where we are, and then using the compass of the Dharma, we can see where we go. So sadhu, 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 what a beautiful teaching. Thank you, Aya.
Okay, thank you everybody for your patient listening and your participation. I truly appreciate the friendship of each and every one who's coming to this group, whether online or in person. I'm happy to see all of you, and we can close by giving respect to the Buddha, Dhamma, and Sangha. Araham Samma Sambuddha Bhagava Buddhang Bhagavantang Abhivademi Savakato Bhagavata Dhammo Dhammang Namasami Supatipanno Bhagavato Savaka Sangho Sangham Namami. Okay, goodbye.
Thank you, Aya. Bye.
Aya.
Thank you, Aya.